The Beach by Joseph Carrabis. He found the gate. His hands remembered the twists and turns of the road, and he guided his Maybach to a beach he hadn't seen in 40 years. Moss and ivy grew over the gate's red brick pillars. Once clearly visible and striking, their elegantly manicured columns and granite ball tops obscured by leaves and branches. Its rusted black angels, their wings spread wide in flight, or warning, he never knew which, swung back from the road and into the overgrowth, the once firm hinges and hasps now slipping and twisted. Birch and elm canopied the long, twisting driveway. Scrub pine marked its edges. Potholes blistered the once smooth pavement, and roots broke through, scarring the surface. He guided his Maybach at a crawl to its final destination, an animal wary in unfamiliar surroundings. He lowered the windows and turned off the AC, then sneezed as the ocean's suffocating humidity engulfed the passenger compartment like a wave overpowering a swimmer. He listened for sandpipers and gulls peeping and cawing, only the breaking waves and susurrations of the surf. The first time he'd come to this beach, he'd been on his bike, a tanned, tall, broad-chested college senior on a sleek performance racer. Pink Izod sweater tied around his back and sun warming his legs, his shorts displaying nicely muscled thighs. The gate was, like him, firm, well-kept, and open. The road was fresh and clean asphalt. He remembered passing the mansions, waiting for someone to come out and confront him, to shame him. He didn't belong. Go home. Then he saw the beach. He saw it and caught his breath. This is what money can buy you, he said. He didn't have money. His clothes, his bike, his education, all came from the generosity of others. Hand-me-downs from unseen hands, and always in the back of his mind the knowledge that he was a wannabe, a pet, somebody's gamble, spare coins in a monkey's cup, somebody's chance to tell their cocktail friends, oh, we have our charities. Back then he smiled more often than he spoke, lest the wrong word come out at the wrong time, and everything be taken away, given to the next gamble, someone of lesser risk and greater return. He watched, though, everything. And a quick study, he learned to walk the walk and talk the talk, to spot the gambler's weaknesses and exploit them, even as they sought to exploit him. Now people wanted to be like him, to know him, to be his friend and be seen with him. 40 years had changed things greatly. His Maybach continued down the driveway. The first mansion leapt at him as he rounded a curve. He braked, closed his eyes, released his white knuckles from the wheel, and counted 10 deep breaths. A quick check of the driver's console showed his nitroglycerin pills close at hand. The mansion showed no movement. Leaves, twigs, and brown pine needles of several New England seasons covered the Andalusian patio. The fine stonework dimpled with bird dung. Wheatgrass grew tall in the cracks. Sun-dried and rotting boards shuttered the mansion's doors and most windows. Some windows were blackened. Some were knocked out or broken. Ivy climbed the stone walls and held the doors, porches, and entryways in place, closed. What the ivy didn't claim was covered in graffiti. He never met the people who lived here and remembered wanting to introduce himself, to let them know he understood this was their beach and he would respect it. He would respect them and be respected in return. The second mansion, the one that faced the beach, waited at the curve. 40 years ago, he saw a young girl watching him from a window there and waved. The granite gravel driveway used to sport Mercedes, Bentleys, and the occasional green on white Cressy Dockham delivery trucks. Now animal tracks rutted its surface. Then there it was, just like 40 years ago, the beach. White sand, water too blue and too warm. Obsidian rocks jutting up from the water, white marble granite running along the last mansion's wall, and all worn smooth by oceanic forces. He got out of his Maybach and looked up. The sky, as before, clear and heavy with the scent of ocean, lilies, and lilacs. His first time here, alone, he vowed to himself and the ocean to never bring another soul, to never mar this place with someone else's breath. He made a pact, an unspoken agreement between himself and the people in the mansions. I'll come here alone. I'll never spoil your beach. It's too beautiful, and I know that's why you decided to live here. The next time he came, the girl watched him from the window. She watched him and waved, and he, young and facing her to show his muscular thighs and chest, waved in return. The agreement struck, the contract made. Nothing changed in all those years. The real estate developer in him sighed. All of this was too good for Cape Ann, for Massachusetts' North Shore. Land this good didn't belong here. He remembered a cove hidden among the mansions, a perfect place for a bungalow, a perfect place to escape and enjoy a cigar against his doctor's wishes. He found the cove while winding his way around rocks on the shoreline, the waves lapping, not even breaking, more caressing the shore. The only difference was the gulls down by the water warring something in the sand. There were no for sale signs anywhere, but that didn't matter. He planned to knock on the door, introduce himself. I was that kid on the bike 40 years ago. He joined them on their elegant patios, laughing and sipping a 40-year-old Oban, laughing. Ha! This was probably cask the year I rode down your road. A few sips in, he'd delicately introduce a business opportunity, beachfront malls and condos. He'd give them a good price, or even better, they could invest, reap the rewards. It's all about the gamble anyway, isn't it? He took off his shoes, rolled up his pant legs, and walked towards gentle waves. Screw that. I'll keep it all for myself. Why should I share? This place shouldn't be shared. Soft, silicate sand cushioned his feet and writhed between his toes. He gazed back along the surf line. Pristine. No trash, no footprints, only his and Justine's the one time he brought her here. The warm ocean water tingled his toes as he stood at its edge. He heard a scuttling and turned, wondering if the mansions were occupied. Just some scurrying little crabs, their shells slightly darker than the sand, holding their claws high as they sidestepped to the water. That's right. Justine loved those crabs. One of them remained on a rock, not making it to the sea. He walked over and it limped away, leaving some blood in its wake. Poor thing's wounded. He looked for a rock, wanting to be merciful. A conical rock appeared in his hand. It fit perfectly, its weight just right for clubbing. He dropped it and backed away. His chest tightened. He knocked the crab away and sat on the rock. The doc said to match your breathing to something slow and regular. That's what the doc said. The waves, slow, quiet. The pain subsided. Footprints? He blinked. Just crabs at the waterline. But just waiting there? Not scuttling? Not waving their little claws on their little arms? No. Just mounds in the sand being washed away by the waves. The ocean swelled. The waves broke. Dark clouds gathered in the east. He walked to the mounds before they washed away, a little winded in his haste, surprised and wondering if some other college seniors discovered his beach. He would greet them, talk to them, tell them something of himself without telling them anything about Justine. Or perhaps say how she had gone on, had married another, had fulfilled her life without him. What good friends they'd become, then ask if one of them could get his pills from his car. Here are the keys. People walking this beach could be respected, trusted to do the right thing. But footprints weren't fresh, at least not by ocean standards. And that disappointed him. But they were a man's and a woman's. They didn't walk straight. They danced around each other. And here and there her heels dug into the sand. Two children at play. He smiled, thought of Justine, and started back to his car. What are those gulls doing over there? They stayed as he approached, not flying away, probably used to humans walking the beach. But there were only two sets of footprints here, a man's and a woman's, only those and his own, and soon his would be lost to the tides and waves. The gulls scattered when he drew near and gathered a few feet further away, cawing their displeasure. They stood and watched him as he stood over their prize, a white muslin jalabras. He felt his stomach rising and couldn't help himself. The first wave erupted from him and knocked him to his knees, his bile covering the jalabras. The second came out only as mucus and tears, the third only as air because he had nothing else to give. His chest tightened. Justine had worn a jalabras when they were here, a white muslin jalabras. But it wasn't a jalabras, only seafoam. The gulls had pecked at some seaweed there. He rocked himself to his feet and wiped his eyes with his shirt tail. His face was damp with sweat and drool. Some bile creased the corners of his mouth. He stepped into the water to wash his face, wading up to his knees, ignoring the salt water clutching his trousers to him. The gulls, barely waiting, descended on his gorge. He splashed his face, then took off his shirt, using it to towel his neck and eyes. Once tanned, now white-fleshed, once well-muscled, now weakened and fat, the gulls laughed at him. Something prickled his feet beneath the waves. Justine's crabs pinched his toes, nipped his ankles, their little crushing and pinching claws drawing little rivulets of blood. The conical stone was in his hands again. He didn't question. He didn't hesitate. It was as perfectly shaped a weapon as it had been 40 years ago. He struck beneath the waves to punish them. Seaweed caught his arm and pulled him. God damn it, let go! The clouds darkened. The ocean roiled. A wave overwhelmed him. He surfaced to see the gulls flocking over him, laughing. Justine had laughed 40 years ago. She looked at the ring he offered and laughed. The ring meant to impress her, but instead only amused her. He'd given up so much to pay for that ring, and she'd laughed. He worked to give her something real, like the mansions, like the beach, something genuinely him, and she laughed. She looked at his face and laughed again. He didn't think they could be serious, did he? He understood he was just an amusement, didn't he? To all of them, an amusement, a toy while they were at school, and, more deliciously, someone their parents didn't know and definitely wouldn't approve of. He picked up a conical stone back then. It fit perfectly in his hand. With a perfect weight, he brought it down perfectly on the back of her perfect head as she walked perfectly away. She staggered and he dragged her back into the cove. Her heels dug into the sand. He hit her again and raped her lazily where she fell, never moving her from the hidden cove, each time wondering what he would do if she gained her senses, each time climaxing with that perfect conical stone gently smashing in more of her skull, like waves gently pounding the beach. He waited until dark, then swum her body far out to sea, pacing himself, giving his strong thighs and broad chest time to rest between laps, until he felt her body would never return and let go. But her eyes opened and her hands clutched at him. Her fingers dug into his already tired arms. No, she pleaded. No! He had to break her fingers before she'd let go. Seaweed wrapped itself around his legs. The undertow engulfed his ankles with icy fingers, clutching hands which wouldn't let him go. Patient hands that had waited 40 years for his return. You should have said yes, he wanted to shout, but there was no air left in him. You should have said thank you, he thought, as the waves pulled him out to sea. He went straight to the police when he made it back, 40 years ago and late after midnight. Yes, we made love all day, he told them. Then we went for a swim and I lost her in the dark, he explained. I searched for her as long as I could, he said, tears in his eyes. I should have drowned myself, he whispered into his hands. I gave her a ring, he shouted, bursting into tears and lowering his head in shame at not being able to save the woman he loved. A tiny cry escaped him as he surfaced once and was pulled down again, under the waters, down to the rocks where the tiny crabs she loved began nibbling on him, his heart not quite done, his flesh still warm, and his blood still coursing, just as they'd done to her, and he so wished she'd said yes those 40 years ago. The end.